right, everyone. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce our faculty speaker for today, Professor Reza Satchu. Reza Satchu is a senior lecturer in the Entrepreneurship Management Unit at the Harvard Business School, where he teaches the entrepreneurial manager, the founder mindset, and founder launch. He is also the founder, managing partner, and majority shareholder of Aligned Vest Management Corporation and the founding chairman of Next Canada. For over 20 years, Reza has been both a serial founder and entrepreneurship professor. He has co-founded, built, and managed 6 operating businesses from inception with a variety of industries. These businesses collectively have been sold for in excess of $3.5 billion. Concurrently, Reza has taught many entrepreneurship courses and created several entrepreneurship programs at Harvard Business School, University of Toronto, and Next Canada. Everybody, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our faculty speaker today, Reza Satchu.
Great. Thank you, Shanae. Thanks very much, and welcome, everyone. I got involved with Aspire from the beginning, and what really struck me about this organization was the ability to scale sort of insights and impact around the world. I'd spent a lot of time thinking about how to create impact in Canada and here at Harvard. And what Aspire did was provided a pathway to hopefully create impact globally. And so I'm thrilled I supported the organization a few years ago, and I'm thrilled to continue to spend time with it because I think the work that Aspire is doing is important. And my hope is that for all of you that are going through the program, there will be some sort of a transformational impact, whether it be today or over time, where you will do things bigger, better, faster than you would have otherwise. Okay, so let's get started. Shanae, I guess I need to share my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, which should be reasonably straightforward.
And we are seeing your screen.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. All right, so let me just start with a question. I'm going to assume that given the topic and given my background, that the reason you showed up to this presentation is because you have a interest in being a founder. And so let me there's a lot of sort of magic around being a founder, and there's a lot of interest in being a founder. And I find that especially with young professionals, this is something that they really want. And so my question, Shanae, maybe you can just call on a couple of people just to get us started, is why would you want to be a founder? It strikes me as it's very risky, it's uncertain, there are all sorts of issues around it. It doesn't seem particularly safe, and especially for some of you, given the financial uncertainty, there are challenges around it. So why don't we just kick it off with what is it about being a founder that is so attractive to so many people, and then we can talk about how we might actually go about doing it.
Great. Yeah, so we have a few people on stage with their cameras on already. So the first person I see here is Tarek Alvilez. So Tarek, if you'd like to unmute, you can let us know why you would like to be a founder. Tarek, are you able to unmute? I see you with your camera on. That's fine. Tarek will get back to you. I see Sabri Abir from Bangladesh. Sabri, if you'd like to unmute and let us know why you would like to be a founder.
Wait. Oh, here's it. Okay. I would like to be a founder because I think I will feel passionate about my work, and I believe I would like to have impact on society. Another thing is independence, I guess. I'll be the boss. Those are the reason for me.
Okay, so I think what Sabri is discussing is something which will probably resonate with a lot of people, which is that you get to choose what you're going to do, you get control, but underlying it is this desire to have an impact. So Sabri, maybe you can just explain, what impact do you want to have?
To be honest, I'm a pharmaceutical major, so I would like to have uh, you know, uh, to related to life science changes, to reach people about medicinal. It could be medicinal. It could be something related awareness. I think I have to think about it. What kind of impact or changes I want to do in society.
Okay, but it strikes me that the ambition you have around impact isn't small. You would like to, improve the health outcomes for as many people as possible. Okay, let's go to one more, Shanae.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sabri, for your contributions. I see another hand raised, but you guys don't have your cameras on, so I'm going to move forward. I see Sergio here with your hand raised. So Sergio, if you'd like to unmute, we'd love to hear why you'd like to be a founder.
Hi, Professor. Nice to meet you. Well, I want to be a founder since I was a child, actually, because I want to earn a lot of money. That was
Mm.
my first thought. But well, I grew up. I have 27 years old right now, and I think that if I'm a founder, I can give job opportunities to many people here in Bolivia, where I live, that they really need it. So I think that in that way I can make an impact. Uh, at the other side, well, as many foundations I can give, as many jobs I can give, I can be more notices in my country, and I can give more opportunities, money opportunities in many charities that Bolivia will need or may have, right? For example, a person here, Marcelo Claure, for example, is the owner of a sports team here, but he's one of the persons that has more money here in Bolivia. And actually, he was the one that was promoting Aspire. That's why I came here, actually.
Yeah. So Marcelo is an interesting fellow. I know Marcelo, and I think, as a founder, I think Sergio is being very honest that, there's a basic instinct for many people, which is the part of the reason I want to be a founder is that I want to collect resources, right? I want to collect money, power, prestige. But what you quickly learn is that those are just tools
Yeah.
to have the thing that you most want. And Sergio referenced it, which is to actually, and many of you are putting this on the chat, which is actually to have an impact, right? To have a positive impact on the people you care about. And that can be as small as yourself, it can be your family, it can be your country of Bolivia, or it can be the world. And so the idea is that perhaps by being a founder, you can collect those resources in a much faster way, and in a much more much more exponential way, so that you can have an impact. Okay, let's hear from one more, and then we'll move on. Shanae, we can't hear you.
So sorry. I realized I'm unmuted. I see Sarfraz here with his hand raised. So Sarfraz, I'm
So,
going to unmute and yes.
so thank you so much, and it's nice meeting you. And yes, I want to be founder because I believe that being a founder, you can create a much more effect. So that's why I want to be founder. I want to manage people. I want to create jobs. I want to help people. That's why I want to be a founder. Yeah, it's all.
Okay, it's hard to hear you,
Uh,
Safra. So yeah.
Sorry about that, Sarfraz, but maybe you can contribute in the chat. I see Fanny Lopez. We'll do this one last one. So Fanny, if you'd like to unmute, we'd love to hear why you'd like to be a founder.
Oh, hello everyone. Well, I would like to be a founder because I can help more people with their entrepreneurship, especially those just starting out. For example, I work in marketing, but I specialize in graphic design and editing good videos. And I would like to teach more people, especially the entrepreneurships, like they can have this knowledge and they can use in like certain applications in their business.
So look, underlying what Fanny's saying is this belief that entrepreneurship is a force for good, right? That it can actually make positive changes, not just in your life, but in other people's lives. And I think many of you come from countries where you've seen governments that have pilfered resources or that have not done what they're supposed to have done, or others who have accumulated resources and not given back to the communities that they're in. And so one of the great things about being an entrepreneur is you can actually, if you collect those resources, and resources not just in terms of money, but in terms of learning and knowledge, as Fanny is suggesting, you might be able to disseminate it to a much broader group and have a bigger impact. Okay, so let's just agree on a definition of entrepreneurship that I think for me resonates greatly. Okay, and I think the most important part around being a founder or being an entrepreneur is not the first part of this definition. It's the second part. Okay, so entrepreneurship is the relentless pursuit of opportunity. So we all know that being an entrepreneur, being a founder is difficult, that you need to relentlessly pursue opportunity. The much more difficult part is the second one, which is without regard to resources currently controlled. Okay, this is a critically important part of being any sort of a founder. Okay, I can't tell you the number of times that I've gone down a founder journey where people have said, how can you possibly build this thing when you have far less information, far less resources, far less experience than others? Okay, and so the key about being a founder is you're opportunity driven and not resource constrained. Okay, so opportunity driven and not resource constrained. There is no founder. 99% of the businesses that have been built would not exist today if founders were limited by the resources they currently controlled. Okay, and we'll walk through some examples. So I can tell you that there were thousands of people whose only job at Barnes & Noble, which was a bookstore chain, was to sell more books. That is what they were supposed to do. And yet here came up this guy, Jeff Bezos, who maybe had read a couple of books, but ended up building what became initially the world's biggest bookstore and then something much bigger. Okay. Elon Musk. There were hundreds of thousands of people who worked at Ford, at Volkswagen, at GM for decades, whose only job was to sell more cars. And here comes this young guy, Elon Musk, who figures out a way to create a different kind of car, a different way to distribute it. And the market cap of Tesla now is greater than the 10 next largest car companies cumulatively. So the point here is and you can pick any business. And what you will see is that these founders accomplish amazing things without regard to resources currently controlled. Okay. In each of these cases, whether it's Zuckerberg, Musk, or Bezos, they had far fewer resources than others. They had no right from an analytical perspective to win. Okay. They had no informational advantage. What they had was a differentiation and insight and a belief that people with far more resources would miss things. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about something that I've developed called the founder mindset. And so, many of you in the chat went straight to why you want to be a founder is because you want to have a positive impact. And I think that is the core of the founder mindset, is that you really want to have a positive impact. Okay. You want to have a positive impact on yourself, but most importantly, you want to have a positive impact on others. Now, the issue here is the kind of impact you want to have requires commitment, right? It's too hard to imagine a world where you could have the impact you want to have, saving lots of people's lives, improving air pollution, improving climate change, whatever the things are that you're interested in, without commitment. Okay? The idea that you can maintain a whole bunch of options and have the impact that you desperately want is somewhat nonsensical. The world is too smart, too competitive for you to do that. But of course, committing to something is really hard, right? What it requires is judgment. Okay. In a world of uncertainty, you have to actually enter into some level of risk by committing to a path which is uncertain. And your hope is that by committing to that path, what I call magic will happen. At a minimum, what you will learn is what you're capable of when you commit to something, which is entirely different than what you're capable of when you don't commit. What you will also see is that people will show up precisely because you have committed, because they will see the fear in your eyes. They will see the ambition in your eyes. They will see the hunger in your eyes, such that your first employee will come up, your first customer will come up, and hopefully your first investor will come. And the goal is that that magic will lead to exponential learning, which will lead to resources that include, yes, money, but more importantly, conviction, confidence, credibility, such that you can have the impact that you want. And in many ways, when you think about the impact you most want to have in your life, and I'd ask you all to write this down in a sentence or two, sort of what is the impact as a young person today looking out, and you say, okay, what is the impact that I most want to have in your life? And maybe just put that in the chat in a sentence or two. And my bet is it won't be that dissimilar from the impact that my class at Harvard wanted to have. This is just a random sampling of my class. And I think that the difference between perhaps what the Harvard students want and what other students want is that the Harvard students, of course, yes, have a massive advantage that they have this brand behind them. But they also have a massive disadvantage in that they are so scared to commit to something because they have so many options ahead of them. And so many of my students will actually never learn the power of commitment because they will be too scared to commit because it will involve shutting off what they deem to be very powerful options. And yes, options have value, but what they completely underprice is the value of commitment. Okay. And so, I'm reading some of the things in chat. I want to give women an opportunity. I want to leave a mark. I want to create I want to train the next generation of future leaders. Well, if you look at what's in the chat and you look at what the HBS class has put, it's very similar. And invariably, every student who says this has a few things in common. The impact they want to have is born out of some sort of childhood trauma or experience, and I suspect that's true of you as well. Sitting here today, the impact they want to have is almost invariably greater than just impact on themselves. And sitting here today, they think it's entirely possible that they can achieve this impact. And of course, the data would show for most Harvard students that they won't achieve the impact that they desperately want to achieve. And so the question is, why is that? Okay. Because what they really want is this, right? And this is what is at the core of the founder mindset, which is effectively, if I summarize what you're all saying in the chat, it's really the freedom, the independence to make a positive impact on those that you care most about. And that can be yourself, your family, your community, your country, or the world. And I view this almost like a hero's journey. So this is Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And I would just say, I view the founder journey as a hero's journey. Okay. So we all think of the top half of this circle as the ordinary world, and think of the bottom half of this circle as the extraordinary world. We all live in the ordinary world at some point in time. And we all will get a call to adventure. And that call to adventure is, in the founder journey, is you see an idea. You see something that you think you can improve. And you sort of think to yourself, wow, well, why has this not been improved? Why does the world exist in this way? Maybe I can do something. But everyone around you tells you you can't do it. Everyone says you don't have enough information, you don't have enough resources. What do you know? How could you possibly build a car company when there are all these people building cars at GM and at Ford? So there's a massive refusal of the call. And most people just stop right there and spend their lives in the ordinary world. Some push through, and invariably they meet just one person a mentor, a parent, a friend, an employee, a customer, someone in this sea of negativity that says, you know what, you may have something here. Like there may actually be something interesting here. And despite the fact that you don't have all these resources, and maybe even because you don't have all these resources, maybe because you're not encumbered by a bunch of legacy issues, maybe because you can think creatively, and maybe because you're relentless, you can do something. And so you cross the threshold. You cross the threshold from the ordinary world to the extraordinary world. And of course, in the extraordinary world, there's just tons of crises, just like a founder journey. You can't raise money. You can't get a customer. You have a breakup with your co-founder. All sorts of things happen. And through all this crisis, you learn something about yourself. You learn that you're actually resilient. You learn that you can actually fight through all this. You learn that even in failure, you're happy that you actually tried. And some of you will go through the ordeal and you'll return back to the ordinary world. And you'll return back with tremendous learning. And it's precisely because of that learning that you'll be able to do the thing you most want to do in the ordinary world, which is to have a positive impact. And that positive impact will accrue to you because you took the adventure through the extraordinary world and learned as much as you did. But of course, there's so many things that would block you from achieving this impact, right? There's so many things, right? We all know that life gets in the way, that, you know, you've got to pay your rent. You've got all sorts of things, okay? And if I think about the reasons why people don't want to be a founder, it's all of these things, right? I mean, these will all resonate with many of you, right? The fact that you don't have enough domain expertise. It's just too risky, okay? There's this quest for perfect information. I'll do it if I just had more information. Okay, now, of course, things like that you got to think are really actually quite absurd because, you know, I have a phrase which is sort of any idiot can make a decision with perfect information, right? Someone else is going to take that opportunity away from you that needs slightly less information, all right? So the real issue is you've got opportunity cost. And most importantly, things like a lack of confidence and a lack of conviction, insufficient resources, right? You want to have a family, so you think about work-life balance. But I want to focus on these last two things because so many of you, I mean, I think there are over 1,500 people here from around the world, and so it's hard to sort of deal with each person's individual circumstance. But here is what I know to be true of all of you, is when you have an idea, the first thought you're going to have is, how can it possibly be good enough? How can it possibly be true that I should forego other alternatives, spend time on this idea, when there are so many others with so much more resources that could have executed on this idea? And so you never actually take that first step because it doesn't seem sensible that your idea could actually make any sense because you don't have all the resources. There are others with far more resources. And so ultimately, it all boils down to a fear and an inability to trust your judgment to commit. And on the one hand, it's actually quite logical, right? It's quite logical for all the reasons we've discussed. Like, why would this idea you have of building a better pen or figuring out a better way to get water to your community? You're not an expert on water. You've not spent 3 decades thinking about how to get water to your community. But then you think about all the other entrepreneurs out there, and you suddenly realize that they were in a very similar position. They also didn't have all these resources. And they certainly didn't have the most resources. Every business I have built, someone could have said to me very easily, that Reza, why you have far fewer resources in terms of information, domain expertise than all these other incumbents who've spent their lives thinking about how to create value in this industry. And so this fear is very real. And I suspect, as I'm talking, many of this would resonate with you. And so these are the questions you would ask yourself, right? How could my idea possibly be good enough? How could it possibly be true that large companies with more people and resources did not think of this idea? How can I possibly give up my other options? And they may be attractive or unattractive, but they're certainly more attractive than this founder journey, and commit to one. And of course, the problem here is if we're trying to have this right tail outsized impact, it's just too hard to build anything of significance without actually committing. But that's really hard to trust your judgment to actually commit. Okay, so what I want to talk about is, where does this judgment come from, right? So like if we could sort of magically have one thing, okay, if we could have magically as a founder, the thing we would most want is judgment, okay? Because imagine a world where you actually could trust your judgment because you thought you had good judgment. Okay, so the founder journey is full of uncertainty. Uncertainty requires decision-making. Decisions happen in the face of uncertainty where you must trust your judgment. And so the question is how do you learn to strengthen your judgment? And so let's just start with, how do you learn the most? Okay, so especially in the face of AI, the real question is how do human beings learn the most? Okay, and I would make an argument that what we need is a definition of learning, okay, in order to maximize it. And so I have many people sort of talk about learning as being, reading or etc. I have a very different view, especially in this day and age, and especially if you want to be a founder, of what learning is. So I define learning as making consequential decisions that you are accountable for. So what does this mean? Well, a decision is consequential if it has uncertainty, if it has risk, the things that most people want to stay away from. Most people want to reduce uncertainty and want to reduce risk. The problem with that strategy is twofold. Upside and impact only occurs with risk. Okay? People have a very negative connotation of risk, which is it's all downside and fear. Well, nothing changes for the better without people going to the extraordinary world where there is risk. So consequential decision-making is risky. And so what happens when you're making consequential decisions is you are practicing your judgment. You are actually trusting your judgment. And so what I would say to you is that to maximize learning, which I've defined as making consequential decisions, you must commit to uncertainty. In order to commit to, and the reason you must commit to uncertainty is because it increases your judgment, which is the trait that every founder is trying to maximize. And the reason I have been teaching for over 20 years, a lot of people say to me, well, isn't a founder born rather than bred? And I say, I don't think that's true. I don't think people have a certain amount of judgment given to them at birth. I think judgment is closer to a muscle like a bicep. You must use it to expand it. And the way to use it is to live a life where you're making consequential decisions. So, of course, that life is tense. There's tension, right? Because it's not easy. But that lack of ease creates real opportunity. And it's only in these uncertain moments where leadership occurs. And, the reality is if you put yourself on this path, the hope is that you will either be really lucky and or really good, and something extraordinary can happen. That would be very different than sort of going on a corporate path. Okay, but here's the problem. When I say commitment to me, you, this is the image that it, like when I say the word commitment, commit to uncertainty, right? For many of you, this is what it feels like, right? Which is like I'm jumping off a cliff into like a torrential hurricane with circling sharks underneath. Like, what right do I have to win if that's what I'm entering into? Right? This founder journey, going from the ordinary world to the extraordinary world, for many of you feels like this. It's racked with uncertainty and risk. And so I want to break this down and say to you that this is not what the founder journey is. Okay, what the founder journey is a series of small C commitments. Okay, what it is trusting your judgment on small things, which then leads to much bigger things. Okay, so when you see something that is interesting or something in your daily life where you're like, this could be better, most people see that, but they don't do anything because they just assume someone else with more resources has thought of it. And so what I'd encourage you is to start thinking about these small C commitments where when you see things, you actually spend 10 or 15 minutes exploring it. And most times the exploration will lead you to nothing. But even in that exploration, because you are trusting your judgment, you will learn something. Because even though your judgment was flawed, there's tremendous learning in that. And occasionally, your judgment won't be flawed. And it might just lead you to something really interesting. So I want to give you 3 examples. And obviously, we have different life experiences. But my hope is that the principles will resonate. Okay. And I am acutely aware that although I started my life in Kenya without very much money, I am acutely aware that my life experience is different than perhaps what you've been exposed to. But I do think that the principles that I want to share with you and the stories that I want to share with you, my hope is that it will resonate. With you. Okay. So I'm going to tell you 3 small C commitments that I made that resulted in an extraordinary result. Okay. So the first one is stop the car. Second one is pick up the phone. The third one is knock on the door. These are all things that you all do as part of your daily life. Okay. So this is Toronto. I was living in New York at the time. I went back to visit my parents and I was driving along the highway. I was in a car being driven in the highway. And what I noticed was all these storage facilities, one after the other. Okay. In the middle of nowhere, kind of in the outskirts of Toronto and, literally beside each other. So all of you've been to Toronto, imagine 12 storage facilities in the outskirts, all single story, one after the other. Okay. So I looked out the window and saw this, and I thought the same thing that millions of other people have thought, which is, why is it that there are, 12 storage facilities with different brands that are one after the other on this highway? I can promise you many, many people had that same idea. Now, I looked at my watch and I'm like, oh, geez, I'm late for dinner with my parents. I'll just forget this. Like, there must be a reason. But then I thought to myself, no, that's not what the founder mindset would do. Okay, this is going to take me 10 minutes and I might actually learn something. So I'm going to trust my judgment. I'm going to pull over and go into this storage facility. And the only insight I had into storage is that I'd stored in New York, and it was very different. In New York, there was multi-story storage facilities in downtown Manhattan. Okay, so just like you, when you have an idea, you're like, wait, I've seen this somewhere else. I don't understand why it's so different here. Okay. And so I knocked on the door, and what I found was that I sort of felt it wasn't a particularly safe facility. The sales rep took a while to come to the front to see me. And when I asked for a locker, they said they were full. And I was like, how can this place be full? So I went to the next one, and I had a very similar experience. And so I won't go through all the steps I took subsequently, but literally that 10 minutes or 15 minutes put me on a path where I started trusting my judgment. And I was like, you know what? There is an idea here. This doesn't make sense to me. And even though self-storage is an industry that's been around for decades, and there are all these fancy people with their fancy brands, there's something like, how can it be that these are in the middle of nowhere? They don't feel particularly safe. The customer service is poor, and yet it's full. Okay. And so that decision ultimately led to us building Storage Now, which then led to me building what became the largest private pay addiction center in Canada, and most recently to building a student housing business in Canada. Okay. These businesses are all real estate operating businesses. They all have many things in common in that they were fragmented at the time. They didn't have institutional capital. They benefited from scale economies and professional management. But when I think about all this value that's been created, none of it would have happened had I not done the small C commitment of stopping the car and trusting my judgment that maybe there was something there. Okay, the next one I would talk about is pick up the phone. So that's a picture of me at your age on the left. That's when I was here at HBS. I guess I'm about 26 years old there. And beside me was this Turkish fellow named Levent Karaman. And Levent was probably the most brilliant person that I'd met. He was a quirky guy, but really, really smart. And we graduated from HBS, and we went in completely different ways. Okay, I went into private equity and then started founding businesses. He became a mortgage-backed trader. Okay, but I said to him way back in 1996, I said, one day we're going to build something together. And in 2009, in the midst of the financial crisis, I called him up and I said, look, I don't know what's happening, but there's all this pain. Like you read the Wall Street Journal and everyone's losing money. There's massive crisis. All these banks are going out of business. And there's this thing, mortgages seem to be at the root of it. Subprime mortgages, which led to the financial collapse. You are a mortgage expert. Maybe there's opportunity. Okay. Maybe when everyone else is running away, maybe there's opportunity. I said, why don't we get together and spend the next few days? He said, well, Reza, I'm busy. I've got this job. I said, no. I think there's, I have no idea, but I think there's something interesting here. Let's get together. And we spent a few days, and ultimately we built a business called KGS. He was the K, I was the S, and we hired a guy named Dan Goldman, and we ultimately sold the business. Okay. My point here again is I had a judgment. I didn't know if it was right or wrong. Okay. But the cost to me was being wrong and just spending a few days. The benefit to me was something that had massive upside. Okay. So don't focus on the numbers here. Like, whether this was 1% of this, it would still be an attractive outcome. And so, but I would put it in sort of the context of the life you're living. The point I'm trying to make here is that by trusting your judgment on these small C commitments, you start to open up a window into something that could be much greater. And most importantly, what that greater thing is this feeling that you can actually trust your judgment. Okay. Okay. I want to talk about one more knock on the door. So this is, so to all the Kenyans, Jambo, Abariako, this is me in Kenya on the left in 1973. We emigrated so neither of my parents went to college. We emigrated to Canada with pretty close to nothing. We grew up on the second floor of this apartment building, which was, trust me, not a very fancy apartment building. My mom was a secretary, and my dad, took about 3 or 4 years before he went to work as a real estate agent. Okay. But what struck me for me was, and I would respectfully ask you to think, because I know many of you have gone through significant obstacles to be here. Okay. And I'm not going to assume that my obstacles were as great as some of yours, but we certainly had obstacles, right? I mean, I moved to a new country at a young age. We moved to 7 or 8 different places in the first 7 or 8 years of being in Canada, and it felt quite uncertain. Okay. But the realization that I had at your age, which I think I would encourage you to think about, is that life journey, I used to think about it as, wow, things would have been so much easier had I had more money growing up. Things would have been so much easier had I been born in this country. Things would have been so much easier had I had a network of relationships. And I think the realization I had, perhaps around your age, was that these obstacles not of your own choosing, in a very odd way, are a massive gift, because you actually learn what you're capable of at an early age, right? You learn what you're capable of. You learn that you can actually survive and thrive and put yourself in a position where hopefully you can capture real opportunity. And perhaps those obstacles give you a superpower, right? Which is that you can commit to other things that have risk precisely because you've lived a life that had a lot of obstacles and a lot of risk, and you've persevered. And so instead of framing it as kind of a victim mentality, perhaps one can frame it as, you know what, I learned a tremendous amount through this, and I'm perhaps better positioned precisely because of that learning, despite the fact that I don't have the resources that others might have. Okay, so for me, this event of coming to Canada was a pretty transformative event, although difficult. Ultimately, we went from a family where, neither of my parents had gone to college, to one where my brother and I ended up going to Harvard Business School, and both built significant businesses and hopefully are having a life of impact. But it became very clear to me that the fundamental reason for this was this opportunity to come to Canada and the obstacles that we overcame. And so I started thinking about, well, why is it that the prosperity gap between Canada and the US is increasing? And why is it that the US on a per capita basis is doing so much better? And this has continued over time. And my thesis was that Canada, and perhaps this is true of many of the countries you're from, was not creating enough right tail entrepreneurs. Meaning the median worker in Canada worked just as hard and was just as productive as the median US worker. But we were not creating these right tail entrepreneurs who were creating prosperity for many more. Okay, so we weren't building these substantive exponential companies. And so for me, this was not a novel insight. Many people in Canada were thinking the same thing. But again, a small C commitment. I was walking along St. George Street, which is where the University of Toronto is, and I thought, well, maybe there's something I can do. And so I knocked on the business school dean's door. He wasn't there. I came out and I said, okay, well, I guess that idea is dead. I looked across the street and it was the Department of Economics. So I went and knocked on that door. And the secretary said, do you have an appointment? I said, no. She said, who would you like to see? I looked up at the board. I said, I'd like to see Dean Berkowitz. She said, well, you can't see him because you have no appointment. I made a bit of I guess I spoke a little loudly. I said, no, I'd really like to see him. Dean Berkowitz stuck his head out. And I said, look, do you have a minute to meet with me? And I said, look, I would like to teach a class on entrepreneurship. I'd like to teach a class called The Founder Mindset. This is back in 2003. I said, I don't need any pay. But I want to teach. He said, well, look, fancy people like you who made a little money, you should just guest lecture. I said, no, I'm committed. I want to be part of the faculty. I want to teach a class. Okay. He said, have you got your PhD? I said, no. He said, have you ever taught before? I said, no. He said, well, why would I let you join the faculty of the University of Toronto and teach a class? And you know what I said to him? I said, because I'm fully committed and it's going to be a great class. Okay. And what he saw, and this is where I say to you that the magic can happen in all sorts of ways. What he saw was someone who was fully committed. He took a risk to actually let me do it. And of course, that course ended up being the top course at University of Toronto for many years. But more importantly, it allowed me to create something called Next Canada, which is a purely philanthropic organization, but which basically takes Canada's most promising young entrepreneurs and puts them through. And I'd actually argue that much of Aspire, if you talk to Kareem and Tarun, I think Kareem Lakhani, who's on the board of my charity Next Canada, I think much of the ideas around Aspire, several of it came from Next Canada. And so really the idea here was to take Canada's most promising young entrepreneurs and give them a very intense 1-year experience where they get mentorship, capital, and education, but really learning by doing. Okay. And so today we have launched over 400 ventures. There's been over $4 billion of capital raised, and most importantly, 10,000 high-performing, high-quality jobs. Okay. And so for me, this is the impact I wanted to have. This is purely a charitable endeavor that I oversee. But for me, it is the point of the founder journey, which is by exercising my judgment, committing, building resources, learning, I've been able to have some level of impact. And the nice thing about it is, of course, it's continued at Harvard Business School, where these cases, which are now taught all over the world, are cases on 21-year-old, 22-year-old students that went through Next Canada that now are in their late 20s that are building really significant businesses. And so for me, it's sort of a full circle moment where these students that came through my program are now being highlighted at Harvard. And these students are from very small towns in Canada who are now building very substantive businesses. Okay, so I want to talk about some key tenets around the founder mindset. And these are tenets that I've come up with over the years that hopefully will be helpful to you as you think about your founder journey. Okay. So entrepreneurship is the relentless pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. That second half is the most important half, because I have every confidence that all of you will work hard. Where I don't have confidence is whether you will actually operate in a world where you're opportunity driven and not resource constrained, where you'll actually trust your instincts and make these small C commitments. Okay. I think it's very important, and I think many of you feel this way, is that entrepreneurship is a force for positive impact and can be learned. Okay. It is not something you're born with. It is something that you can learn. And I think that for many of you, especially from these poorer countries, the most important thing you can do is to start something that creates positive jobs and helps many families, build your resources, and then give back to that community. I think the goal here, especially at your age, the goal is not to maximize money. The goal is to maximize learning. Money will come to those who learn the most. Okay. The goal is to maximize learning. So for me, I know exactly how to do that because I've defined learning. So I've defined learning as consequential decision making. And so I live a life where I constantly want to be making decisions. I constantly want to be in a world of uncertainty, because I know the more decisions I make, the more I will learn. Right? Think about all the founders you know that had never managed people beforehand, that founded something and today are managing many, many people. And you think to yourself, well, how did they learn that? They did not go to school. It's not like they'd managed people beforehand. And it's because of this concept called exponential learning, which founders have precisely because they are making decisions. They're not advisors. They're not sitting in from the sideline. They're actually in the arena making decisions. And it's precisely because of the risk involved in making decisions that they're trusting their judgment and developing that muscle. Okay. I do think and this perhaps is relevant for many people here, is that obstacles not of your own choosing are a real opportunity to learn. And I would encourage you to reframe those obstacles as one where, yes, they were difficult, I'm sure, but really you learned a tremendous amount about yourself. And that's why you're here. Okay, the gap between confidence and capabilities is where judgment lies. Okay, so what this means is many people, they do the opposite, okay, which is that they always want to operate in a zone where their capabilities are greater than their confidence, right? So imagine that zone. There is zero judgment there because obviously you know what you're doing. There's no risk because your capabilities are greater than your confidence. You need to flip that. A founder must operate in a world where their confidence is greater than their capabilities because in that gap is judgment. Now, it's very important that your confidence not increase too much because it will then go to arrogance. No founder is successful if they come across as arrogant. But your confidence must be in excess of your capabilities. Risk. If we had more time and I asked you, what do you think of risk? Many of you would just say fear, downside, failure, bad. I want to get away from it. I think many of you have lived a life of risk, right? Whether it's because of your own choosing or not. You haven't had enough money. There have been times when, perhaps there wasn't enough healthcare or food or whatever, also, or certainly people close to you. And so in a way, you understand what risk feels like. And you've seen the downside of it. But I need you to understand that there's real upside around risk, right? There's no opportunity or upside without risk. Okay, the definition of risk is that there is both downside and upside. And so I would encourage you to calibrate your risk properly, both the upside and the downside. The other thing I would encourage you to do is many people, in the face of uncertainty, don't make a decision because it's hard. And so I would say a critical part of being a founder is actually when you're in doubt, you must act. It's precisely because you're uncertain that you must act. Now, that action can be that you stay the course, but you must use your judgment and consciously say, this is what I'm going to do, as opposed to most people who are sort of like deer in headlights and just are paralyzed by the changing information. The other thing that is part of the founder mindset and that I certainly try to live my life with is that if you are involved, you are responsible. Okay? Meaning, if you are involved, if you see something, if you're building something and someone does something that's across the line, it's way better to just not point fingers and be responsible for it. Okay? It's just, I think, a much healthier way to live your life. I know it sounds like it's risky, but I actually think the opposite is worse, where you're capable of everything and culpable for nothing. Right? So just to be clear, what that means is you're entirely capable of being responsible, but you choose not to and therefore not actually culpable for anything. This miscalibration of risk, I don't know whether this is helpful or not, but I certainly see this a lot at Harvard. Okay. And I know that obviously there's a gap between being at Harvard and where you are, but I think the principles are quite similar because one might say, once you come to Harvard, you would think that you would be swinging for the fences, right? Because your downside is covered, right? You have the brand, etc. Well, I've actually seen the opposite repeatedly, which is that people dramatically overestimate their downside and underestimate their upside, which leads to performance that is far more mediocre than it should be. And so entrepreneurship is, of course, a very different journey, okay? Where obviously you have to make sure that you're dealing with unacceptable outcomes, okay? Ones where you're putting your family at risk, where you can't afford your food, whatever it may be. But at the same time, you must also look at the right side of this distribution, okay? Which is, what can I do here to actually get that impact that I want to have, okay? And again, I would say far too often we don't allow ourselves to learn what we're capable of because of an abstract fear of failure, okay? So a key piece, especially in this world where, you know, everyone's swiping left or right to find partners, or it's very hard to commit to church or a home or to an individual, to a relationship. People really view commitment as a sacrifice in a world of all these options. And I would just say that I think it is far better to view commitment as a superpower. Okay? You need to figure out what you're capable of. And the way you will figure out what you're capable of is because you commit to something you really care about. Okay? And I would just ask you, and we'll have a few minutes for questions. I'll just ask you, would you rather try and fail or never try at all? Okay? This is really, you know, at the end of your life, the question you would ask yourself is, you know, did I actually take the swing? Did I actually do the thing that I most wanted to do? And for many of you, my sense is that is actually going down on the founder journey. Okay, the reason this commitment piece is so important, okay, it's precisely because you're cutting off options, which seems like a very odd thing for someone to do, right? Because we all know options have value. The reason to cut them off is because commitment has more value. Okay. And we've talked a lot about this, and certainly our culture sort of, you know, diminishes it. Okay. And so there's this sort of dichotomy happening where there's a commitment crisis that is coinciding with an unprecedented boom in opportunities for entrepreneurs. And with AI and technology, the advent, the barriers to entry to building a business are much lower today than they were beforehand. Now, I know that some of you come from countries and ecosystems where it's very hard. It's still very hard. But here's all I can tell you is that it's getting easier. Okay? It may not be where it needs to be, but it's people like you that are going to figure out how to get it there. So the real question I would ask you is, can you develop unswerving commitment in an age of distraction? Okay, well, you know, what might you be capable of, and can you think of commitment as a superpower and not as a sacrifice? I want to leave you with a couple of research studies. Again, focus less on the specifics, although I will tell you the specifics, and focus more on the principles that might be relevant to you in your lives. Okay, so I've been sort of saying this for 20 years, but I didn't have any research to prove it until my colleague here looked at 5 million data points and came up with this article, or came up with this research. So what I've always said is that even those founders that fail, okay, will have learned more than those that didn't go on the track, because they will be making decisions. And even though on balance their judgment was flawed, it is far better to have been in the arena making decisions, because you learn. And so what this research report shows is that Professor Gompers looked at 5 million data points, 5 million people. And what he said, and what he saw, this composition was comprised of the following: people who had very similar educational and professional backgrounds. One group went in a traditional path, got traditional corporate jobs, and another group founded businesses and failed. He did not look at businesses that were founded that succeeded. And what he found was that these failed founders came back into the corporate world with 2.8 years of seniority over and above the equivalent people with equivalent backgrounds who had just joined the corporate world immediately. Okay? So effectively, what it showed is that these companies valued the judgment and the learning despite the failure. Okay, I want to mention one other research report. So Harvard the Harvard study of adult development is the longest study of contentment ever taken. And so effectively, unfortunately, it's just men, but basically 65 years ago, Harvard picked 400 Harvard grads and 400 people from inner city Boston, from low-income families. And over the years, they monitored these 800 men. And not surprisingly, what you saw was some of them succumbed to health issues. Some were at the top, ended up at the bottom. Some were at the bottom, did very well financially. Some got divorces. Some committed suicide. Some did amazing things. And so this report was published a couple of years ago where they kind of said, okay, now all these men are, to the extent they're still alive, are in their 80s. And they asked them, what is the single most important component or variable to your happiness? As you reflect on your life, what is the single most important key? And by an incredibly relevant factor, that key was committing to long-term enduring relationships. Okay, now some of you aren't old enough to have had long-term enduring relationships. Here's the thing about long-term enduring relationships. Long-term enduring relationships go through crisis at all times or at many times, right? You see it with your parents. You see it in all sorts of ways. There's a health crisis. There's a marriage crisis. There's a trust crisis. And it turns out that actually committing to that person and going through these crises to a friend or a family member over the years is actually the thing that provides the most contentment. And so commitment is not just a superpower when it comes to a founder journey. I would suggest to you that it's a superpower when it comes to contentment. Okay, I want to leave you with one last thought, and then we can have a few minutes for questions. This is a quote by Teddy Roosevelt, who's a former president of the United States, and he says, "It is not the let's change man to person." Okay, it is not the critic who counts, not the person who points out how the strong person stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his or her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Okay, so I'll leave you with this one last question, okay? And maybe we can start the conversation here. I want to ask you, and I understand that each of you have very different life contexts, but all of you have seen things, and you've convinced yourself that for whatever combination of reasons that you shouldn't explore it. Okay, so let me ask you this question. What will be your small C commitment? Okay, what does that look like? My hope is that this lecture has at least inspired you to follow through on a small C commitment and to trust your judgment that there might actually be something there. So Shanae, maybe we can, I can ask people, I can see.
Yeah.
Temi Lolua, I love the name, from Nigeria.
Good afternoon or good morning. We're currently in the afternoon here. Thank you very much for the session. This one, by the way, the quote you read last is one of my favorite quotes in the world. I have written on my book here. But I think my small commitment would be to pick the call. I'm always averse to anything that involves, stepping out of my comfort zones.
Yeah.
So I think my small commitment would be to pick the call. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I think that's terrific. I think that, look, learning occurs in uncomfortable places. So I think you almost have to live a life where you're constantly picking discomfort. Because it's precisely because that's where you will learn the most. Okay, let's go. If you can tell me before you answer the question, just tell me what country you're from. Okay, Harshita. Well, I can't hear you.
Arshita, we can't
Yeah.
hear you. Could you unplug your headphones? Maybe that will help.
No, we can't hear you, Harshita.
Yeah. I'm audible right now.
Okay, yes, that's better.
Yeah, so by the way, great session. So I really loved your stories and enjoy it. And one
Where are
of
you,
the
where are you,
commitment,
Harshita, where are you from?
yeah, I'm from India.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Hi, by the way, great session. And especially I loved how your examples and also the real life stories really quite inspired me. And one of the commitment I would like to make is avoid the fear of rejection. So, especially while applying for the jobs, for some time, I really stopped applying for the job due to the fear of rejection, despite possessing some skills. So right now, like this is the first commitment I would like to make is take that first step ahead so that I can really continue to follow my passion and also make a big changes in my life.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful thing. I hope you do that. I think here's the thing, especially being a founder, you are rejected at all times, literally at all times. And it's actually quite personally devastating how much you are rejected. But I think, I think the way to think about this is there's no glory if you're not in the game. And being in the game means that you will be rejected by many. And so I think this fear of rejection, I think you're accurate in that you've just got to understand that that the way to get the things you want is to be open to the fact that many others won't see it and will reject you. And frankly, the more times you sort of get up to the plate and swing the bat, the more likely someone's going to see it. So I would encourage that behavior. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, Virtus, where are you from?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hello, Professor. I'm Vertius from China,
Okay.
and actually, I'm already being a founder. Started my own. It's kind of I will say I'm a physical therapy consultant in China. So my small C commitment is exactly same as why I want to be a founder. It's like keep pursues the personal freedom and keep pursue my vision and mission and make my values come true. And of course, pursue for the money and more resources to improve the to make uh, as much as people live better. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay. That's great. One of the things I see that there's many people on the chat that are putting things in. I think a lot of these commitments are great, but some of them are very large and vague. And so I would encourage you to think about tangible, small commitments that you can make that are consistent with the much larger goals that you have. Okay. And so I think it's just important to start making these steps that are consistent with the larger goal. And so things like making a small C commitment to dedicate 30 minutes, that makes sense to me. Okay. And so think about the examples I gave, sort of trusting my judgment to knock on the door and pursue an idea or whatever it may be. So I would encourage you to do that. Okay, Hasina, where are you from and what's your small C commitment?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
We can, yes.
Okay, this is Hasina Ibrahim. I'm from Afghanistan, and I'm so happy to be here. And that was a great lecture. And my small C commitment is to kind of just forgot what other people think about me and what's their judgment about me and what I'm doing. Because when you're a country like Afghanistan and you're a girl and want to start to have your own business or you want to be the founder, there are lots of judgment coming through to you, and they are saying that you're a woman and you cannot do anything. So you have to just stay at home. So I just want to deal with the people's judgment about myself.
Yeah. So Hasina, let me ask you a question because obviously my hope is you can do that. And of course, I believe that that you should do that. But how will you do that?
Trusting to my judgment and also make myself to be a self motivated and have confidence, I think.
Yeah.
Because somehow when you're hearing the other judgment of yourself and you're losing your confidence, that why people are telling me these things which I'm not. And this is the way that they are making you to lose your confidence. And I think improving your self-confidence is the great way to deal with this.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. And what I would encourage you to think about, Asina, is the reason you're here and the reason you've been able to get to this spot is precisely because you've overcome a lot of things. Okay. Meaning for all the things you brought up early on, you shouldn't be here. Okay. And so you're here. You've been able to trust your judgment to get here. And those obstacles that you've overcome, my hope is give you confidence to overcome all those that want to destroy your confidence. Okay. Okay. Let's move on. So, okay, patience.
Yes, Patience, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Yes. Where are you from, Patience?
I'm from Nigeria.
Okay.
And Professor, thank you so much for the lecture. I've been so inspired. I had to take a lot of notes.
Okay.
Because at some point while you were speaking, I could just relate with my journey. I'm currently a founder. I'm working here in Nigeria, and I work with girls from rural communities just to inspire them to pursue and see a brighter future ahead of them. And I've had so many setbacks, many of them. And in fact, at this point, one of the reasons I got into Aspire was I was at that point where I broke down and I was like, I won't do it again. I would not continue on this journey. It's tough. No one is supporting me. Family is even against it, you know. And I just saw the congratulatory message from Aspire, and they were like, you've been shortlisted into this program. And when I read through, I saw that it had so much to do with leadership and all of that. And when I saw this session from you, I was so inspired. I was like, I really need to be part of this session. So for me, that small C commitment will be pick myself up from all of the rejections and trust my gut to continue with my research. At every point where those thoughts come, I'll stop the car and just like you said, yes, go knock at the door.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think you're saying two things. One is I think, you know, the world is full of people. It's like that hero's journey where they want to refuse the call. Like, you know, people just like to keep things the same way. And in many ways, especially when you're young, people think, well, what do you know? How could you possibly lead to any sort of positive impact? And I think you just have to trust your judgment and take some risk. Now, obviously, I understand that you've got to moderate that and make sure that you're not taking unacceptable outcomes. But I think that the track you're pursuing and that you're here. I love the fact that you're already thinking about how to have a positive impact on others. I think it turns out that that's a massive gift to be able to do that, and brings actually great joy. So I hope that all comes together for you. Okay, we'll just do a couple more and then we'll close. All right, Yusuf from Turkey.
Hello, Professor. First of all, I would like to say that I was really impressed by the lecture, and I didn't take any notes because I was really focused on your speech and I didn't want to interrupt myself. And for me, that the small C commitment is pretty much answering questions that I'm interested in throughout the life, career, business. And the example actually you give on the lecture about stopping the car, it really sparked something in my brain because it just felt just like me. Whenever I see something like that, even on the road or when I was talking with my friends, if there is some question on my mind which I need to answer, I just stop myself and focus on that, and that's kind of my obsession. I don't know whether that's good or not, but
No,
I
think
never
it's good.
stop until I get a satisfactory answer.
Yeah, I think that's a very good process. I mean, look, I think within reason, it's a very good process. I mean, it's sort of very consistent with what I'm suggesting is when you see an insight, take the time to explore it, and don't just assume that someone else has thought about it. It's just not the case. Okay, Falastin from Jordan.
Falastin.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah.
There she is.
Hey, I'm Palestine Asmar from Jordan. Thank you so much, Professor. This is my first masterclass, and I really enjoyed it. I do actually like attending so many classes like these, and even in university, whereas anything that is about entrepreneurship or starting a company or something like that, I really enjoyed it. Even though I know that I don't have a clear idea in my mind, but though I really want to just explore more, observe more. And when you said about the things about risk taking, I remembered some things that I actually took, the risks I took this semester. For example, in my graduation project, or recently, where I saw some chances and opportunities, and I said no thanks. This could actually not be the one for me. And about the small C commitments, I'm just thinking right now that I need to be disciplined. So the things that I would take, or the small C commitment that I would take, is working on just one thing, just focusing on one thing, and um, building my new habits.
Okay,
So
good.
yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, great. So look, let me close. I think that's great. And I would just say, one of the things I heard you say was that I don't have an idea right now. Here's the thing. I think all of you have many ideas. Okay. I think all of you have many. I don't think the problem is that you don't have ideas. Okay. I think you could literally go through your day and write down all the problems that you see. Those are ideas. Okay. You all have ideas. I know you have ideas. Okay. What I need you to have is conviction in those ideas. Again, not conviction jumping off a cliff, conviction trusting your judgment to knock on the door, stop the car, pick up the phone. Okay. And I want to end with this hero's journey. Okay. Which is really what I hope all of you will go on. Okay. And it starts exactly that way. You will have an idea. It will be something that will inspire you. Okay. And everyone will tell you that you can't do it. How can a girl in Afghanistan do this? How can someone who has no, and look, they're all going to say that you can't do it. And the question you have to ask yourself then is, can I trust my judgment just to get a little more information? Okay. I'm not going to jump off a cliff into shark infested waters, but just because everyone's telling me I can't do it doesn't mean I can't do it. I need to actually explore it for myself and see if I can do it or not. Okay. And invariably what will happen is that someone will see what you see. Okay. Someone will see it. And that person will help you get from the ordinary world to the extraordinary world. And what I call the extraordinary world is you're building something or doing something that not everyone can see. And in fact, most can't. And it's precisely because of that, you're going to go through all sorts of ordeals, right? There will be crisis. You won't have enough money. You'll have you'll lose a great customer, whatever it may be. And what you'll learn is it's because of those crises, it's because of those difficult decisions that you'll start developing the thing you most want, which is judgment. And then you will come back with better judgment, with more learning, with more resources, and you will be able to accomplish or be in a much better spot to accomplish the thing that we started with, which is the impact that you want to have. And it's precisely because of this journey that people like you will make the ordinary world a much better place. Okay. So with that, I wish you health and happiness and a life full of commitment. Okay. So good luck to all of you. Thanks, Janae, for setting this up.
Of course. Thank you so much again for a wonderful and really inspiring session. I hope that everybody that was here today has a fire kind of lit under their bellies a little bit. Because again, it's super duper inspirational hearing your session. So thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Good luck to everyone.
Wonderful. All right. So with that, that brings our masterclass session today to a close. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to close down the chat for a quick moment, just so I can share the attendance link with everyone. You'll see the attendance link here. Please give me one other quick moment, and I will also go over just some of the instructions with folks, just so everybody understands how exactly they can submit their attendance form. Give me one quick moment. Okay. So again, what you'll do when you go to that link, you'll go to the first link that's in that entry. So it says the first link is to go to your log into your Aspire account at apply.aspireleaders.org. Give me one second. Here we are, here are my slides. So yeah, first thing you'll do, you'll log into your Aspire account at apply.aspireleaders.org. You'll sign in using the same exact email address that you used to apply. After that, after logging in, you will open up a new window and you'll paste the attendance link in your browser and fill out the form. You'll also notice that the pre-class questions are also included in the attendance form. So if you didn't get a chance to do your pre-class materials beforehand, you'll also submit it in the attendance form, and you can go back and submit it on Discord if you'd like to. So please make sure that you are grabbing the attendance link before the session closes today. If you missed the attendance form when we close out the Zoom session, you can find the link in Discord underneath the specific professor chat channel. So if you go to Discord and if you go to the Professor Satchu chat, you'll be able to see the attendance link there. Additionally, if you don't have access to Discord, do not worry. You can also find the attendance link in the resource recordings tab on your module website. Just as a note for some of you that are going to go to the module website, give us about 15 minutes. It will be up and available in about 15 to 20 minutes. So lastly, as the final reminder, you guys have 3 hours to submit the attendance form. All right, if you guys feel like you need to hop to it right away and fill it out, you're more than welcome. If you have to complete a task really fast and then come back to it a little bit later, that's perfectly fine. But if you are not able to submit it in those 3 hours, then you will have to attend another masterclass to fill out another attendance form. All right. So with that, thank you everybody for attending today's masterclass session. I know some of you may be aware that there is another masterclass happening later on today in about an hour. So if you guys would like to, I hope to see some of you there. And yeah, make sure that you guys fill out the attendance form, and we hope to see you guys in another masterclass. Thank you.